Right, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be custom restoring this Corgi Lotus Europa. So you can see it's in quite a rough shape here. Here's a matchbox one I have, much better shape. So the boot opens and there's an engine in there and some storage space. See on the bottom it's Corgi Juniors in Great Britain. So we'll crack on, use Dremel, 1.5mm bit, drill out the centre of the post. Normally I'd have a stopper on here to stop drilling in too far. About 4mm is how far I'm going to go today. Then I'm going to take a hand drill, so not a power drill, just a sort of hand turning drill, and then take off the head of the rivet carefully. This is, I find, is better than using a power drill as it gives you more control. And it did slip off a little bit, so I'm still use the Dremel to sort of remove a little bit of excess that's on the sort of circle cutter. So I'm going to pull apart the car now. Come apart quite easily. I've already done the front rivet. So we've got the base. We've got the sort of rear light assembly and the engine in one piece. Quite good detailing on it. Then there's the interior and also like boot lid. The dashboard sort of fell apart when I tried to pull it off, so just leave that as it is. Glass, crack free but a bit scuffed up, so we'll remedy that later. Then I'm going to take the wheels off to do this. Just use a Dremel, cut off wheel and cut through the axle. I'm not going to reuse these wheels, so it doesn't really matter if they're damaged, but it's only the axle I'm cutting away. And they simply pull off like that. And do the same for the other side. Right, so we're going to strip the paint off of it. So I've got another car in here as well. I use the caustic soda method, so first some boiling water to cover the cars. And after that put in the caustic soda, which there's quite a violent reaction. You can already see paint and stuff floating around in the top. Water's changed colour from transparent to sort of purple, which was the colour of the other car that was also in there. Right, just let that do its work. It's very quick, so here we are, pull out the parts. Here comes the Europa body. As you can see, all the paint's just sort of melted off it. It's caustic soda, so it's actually dissolving a thin layer of metal between the paint and the sort of bodywork, which allows it to come off in sheets as it does. And if you let it cool down, this paint will like crisp up again, and it'll be harder to get off, so you want to get it off as soon as you get it out. So I've rinsed it off, and this is what we're left with. Quite a sort of rough looking oxidized surface. Base isn't as bad because I'd already used a wire brush to shine it up. But now we're going to use like a compass and just sort of pick away at some of the paint that remains in the crevices. and I took Y-wheel on the Dremel, and you can see that completely removes all that oxidation that was on the surface. You don't need to go at it too hard, it's just enough to remove it and get shined up. Obviously you're not going to see this after it's painted, but it provides a nice smooth surface for the paint to stick to. And I'm just going to go over the base as well, even though it has been shined up, it can't harm it doing a bit more. And we'll use a different style of wire here to get the inside of the boot. You want to get all the surfaces nice and uniformly covered, apart from the inside of the casting where the paint isn't going to really be seen. You can just leave that as it is. So next we're going to remove some of the imperfections in the casting. There was a big offender in this wheel arch. That was probably where the metal was poured in. So I'm just going to use a small file to cut away to get rid of it. You don't want to go too far with these, otherwise you can start taking chunks out of the metal that you didn't want to remove. And then I'm using sort of slightly finer sanding stick to remove some seam lines that was on the front of the body. And putting the casting together, see this what the seam looks like, because sometimes there can be a step, and in this case I think it was just quite a rough surface, so I'm using a bigger sander just to get rid of some of the pitting and stuff that was in that area. Moving on to the windscreen, you're going to use this sanding stick. I think it was an 800 grit, but it's quite well used, so it's probably more the equivalent to 1200 grit now. And just going over it until all the sort of deep scratches are removed and it's a sort of uniform level of reflectivity. And put some water on it as well, and just wet sanding it using the other side, which again was probably started off about 2000 but is equivalent to something much higher now. Again, removing the scratches left from the previous side of the sanding stick. And then we've washed that, and then I'm using a buffer stick to shine up to a sort of completely transparent finish. So using the rougher side of that, which is almost like a fabric, and then after that going over to the second side, which really shines it up. And that's that done. Right, now we move on to priming the casting. So I'm using the Tamiya Fine White Surface Primer and just applying it lightly onto the body shell, making sure everything's covered obviously. I think I gave the body shell just one coat of this, but I gave the base two as it was going to be painted white later on. And then this is, well, let the primer dry for a couple of hours. Moving on to the red, I'm using Tamiya X7 Gloss Red, thinned down with Mr. Colour Leveling Thinners to get a really shiny, smooth finish. So we're just sort of dusting it on first. And there's a sort of common misconception that a dust coat you need to leave to dry, but that's not really the point. The primer you leave to dry, and then the dust coat you let sort of get a bit tacky, and then that sticks to the further coats of paint. Otherwise a dust coat would just act as a sort of another primer, which I suppose would work if you're using something like Spectraflame, where that's all you're putting onto the casting, but if you've got a primer, that doesn't really matter. So that was a sort of light coat, and then we're just going to go in with a much heavier one now. Build it up, probably do 2 coats in total. Right, I painted the interior as well, the rear deck red, that same shade. It was red before, but just so it matched. And now I'm doing the interior. I'm just using Revel Aqua Color, black matte acrylic. Just a nice thin layer, build up in a couple coats. I'm not going to put any other detail into the interior because you won't be able to see it that well when it's finished. But as long as it's not bright red, because that wouldn't really look fitting with the rest of the colour scheme. You could mask off the red and spray the black on, but with these acrylic paints, they tend to go on quite smooth, and it's a matte finish, so that hides some of the brush strokes that would appear if it was gloss. Right, these are the wheels I'm using. They're monoblock wheels, the 16 spoke ones. They have Falcon branding on the tyres, but I decided that wasn't really appropriate, so I flipped them over for this. So it's just a black sidewall. Now it does come with these like brass rods, which you can use by crimping the ends over and then like sliding them on. But instead I'm going to use a Hot Wheel axle because it's got this sort of little flange at the end which holds the wheel on. It looks a bit neater, and it would also work better because it means I can use the original clips for the wheels that came in it. So it's half a Hot Wheels axle that goes like halfway into the little clip section. Make sure it's pushed in all the way, otherwise you'll get quite a lot of movement that isn't wanted. And then rest it somewhere. And I'm going to use some super glue. You probably want thick stuff, but I'm just using thin stuff. Use cocktail sticks to apply it. Try not to let it run into the wheels, otherwise it'll seize it up and your car won't roll. Just ensuring there that the axle's poked in. Now we're going to move on to this chrome section. So there's a seam line going across the back, which shouldn't be there. And there was also a sort of protrusion, which I believed was supposed to be simulating the exhaust pipe, but I just sanded it all off and I'm going to fix that later. Just ensuring all the evidence of it's gone, so going with the rough one first and then going with the fine one after. Right, this is a solution to the exhaust pipes. I'm using these really fine drill bits, and this is a 1mm one I'm using, and it's going into my pin vise. It's a sort of hand drill thing, and then just drilling a hole in. I don't know, you probably want to go in about 2 or 3 millimeters. I just went in until it started coming out the other side, which was probably a bit excessive, but I made sure it would stick in properly. And you can see the excess plastic just being driven out the hole. So this is what I'm going to replace it with. Albion Alloys 1mm aluminium tubing. And just use a scalpel and roll it on the blade to cut off. You don't want to cut it with a pair of snips because that would just crush the tubing. If you roll it, it maintains that circular profile, but it does tend to sort of flare the ends out, so I'm just using the file just to make sure it's all smooth. And then using a knife just to widen the hole out again, because some of the excess metal went into it. Just rotate the end of it. And that'll just be glued in some super glue, but that works as the new exhaust. Bit of an odd place for the car to have it. It's quite high up on the rear of the car. And now we're going to move on to painting the details. So the red paint's had a few hours to dry on a heater, so it's nice and solid, shouldn't be damaged by any fingerprints. And I'm going to use some Revel Aqua 90 silver to paint in the lights this time. So there you are. Most of it was off camera, so I just jumped it. It's relatively simple, just a fine brush and steadily fill in the details. Most of them have like a raised lip around the edge, so you can just like push the paint around into the lip. And now we're just going to hit the bumper some silver as well. There was a small dent in the bumper, which is still there. I couldn't really get rid of it, but just dragging the edge of the brush along the bumper to get the front edge of it, and then just going along the top edge with a steady hand just to fill in the rest of it. You can see there I painted in the grille black just to sort of disguise it a bit, and it wouldn't look correct in red anyway. And again, just like I did with the top of the bumper, hit the bottom of the bumper, get it covered. Now move on to the rear section again. Painted the middle of it black and the light silver, and I'm going over some clear paint. Alright, that's the orange done. And we'll move on to the red now, so shut the pot of the orange. Clean the brush off. Grab the red. Same process again, just doing the top half. I was running out of the red here, so making sure I get a nice heavy coating. And that's it. You can see these look much more realistic than just having solid opaque red and orange used for the lights. So this brings us to the final assembly. I did tap the 1.5mm holes with an M2 tap, and I'm using M2 by 4mm cross-headed screws. I've found the button head screws look better, but the actual head diameter isn't great enough to overcome the size of the hole. So I'm using the cross heads instead, so make sure the cars stay together. And then just screwing it together as simply as that. Much better than gluing them, because you could take them apart again if you wanted to. I did paint the screw heads white as well, so they blended into the base a bit better. And that's the car finished. Doesn't roll very well because the wheels are slightly too big, but it's not that the wheels are glued in. It's just, I don't know. You could probably use a Dremel and open up the arches a bit more, but now it's painted, can't really do that. So here's a comparison. What it looked like before. Well, that one's in slightly better condition. The Matchbox one. Interestingly, the other one has a yellow interior section, and this is the final result. So obviously gone for the sort of classic Lotus red and white scheme. Those wheels do look much better than the originals. And you can see the exhaust pipe added in there. Anyway, thanks for watching. I know I haven't uploaded in a while, but here we are.